I think, today is a significant day in Gaza, in the besieged Gaza Strip. There have been 11 weeks of blockade of food, which has brought conditions to famine levels in certain areas of Gaza. Israel has been, in addition to assassinating Hamas personnel to prevent the adequate distribution of aid through traditional UN lines, what they've been doing is emboldening gangs, including figures connected to ISIS smuggling networks in the Sinai Peninsula, to steal the aid and then sell it at inflated prices. And by creating the crisis, they create the impetus for completely changing aid distribution. Now, the U.S. could easily have stepped in, the Trump administration, and said, we're going to suspend arms shipments and until you enact a ceasefire and you open up all distribution points. But they didn't do that. Instead, this network of shady NGOs and fake charities was set up to completely subvert the UN system, to take the United Nations, UNRWA, out of Gaza. And this is all part of regime change in Gaza and ultimately part of occupation and ethnic cleansing. And we'll get into the details here. But today was the day when this new aid system was supposed to be implemented. It's been a complete failure, a complete catastrophe, leading to stampedes, concentration camp scenes where people from Gaza have been. There you go. I mean, that was the featured image on this stream. And this is how people in Gaza are supposed to get their food now. They have to march across kilometers and kilometers of an active war zone, where they can easily be targeted by drones, quadricopters, snipers, and then get to this point where they're put in cattle pens, and then they wait there as American mercenaries doing static protection allow them to get like a box of food. And they're all doing this on behalf of Israel. So it led to catastrophe and chaos. But how did we get here? I think that's what we need to address, since we haven't done a stream in like a month. Aaron, what's your sense of how it got to this point? Because honestly, I mean, you would have thought that the genocide would have been wrapped up by now. Even Trump said there's nothing else for Israel to gain. They're just wasting time.
Yeah, and he also said a lot of people are starving and suffering, and we're going to do something about it. But so far, what Trump has done is continue to give Israel the green light. And we thought maybe there was a breakthrough a few weeks ago when the U.S. bypassed Israel, at least as far as we could tell, and directly negotiated with Hamas to free Israeli-American soldier, an IDF soldier, Adon Alexander. And there was an agreement there made between Hamas and Steve Witkoff, in which Adon Alexander would be freed, and Hamas got nothing officially in return. Like, nothing was announced, but what emerged later, Hamas officials said, was that Witkoff told them that if they can free Adon Alexander, then Trump will basically end the blockade, and Trump will push for permanent ceasefire talks. And by all appearances, the Trump administration reneged on that, gave Hamas absolutely nothing. So it looks like the Trump administration, if Hamas's claims are correct, completely played Hamas. And and then it makes you think, like this was, as this was happening, like the media was getting all these reports fed from the White House, people around the White House. There's a big rift between Trump and Netanyahu, and that Trump is defying Netanyahu. And now, especially in retrospect, that looks like a giant con. But there is no rift between Trump and Netanyahu, at least on Gaza, maybe on the Iran talks, but at least on Gaza, because when it came to freeing Adon Alexander, Hamas got absolutely nothing in return. And Witkoff betrayed his promise.
Yeah, and I guess the report was from DropSite. Jeremy Scahill's, got Osama Hamdan and Bassem Naim on the line consistently, and those are like the two front-facing figures from Hamas that speak to English language media. We've interviewed them. I interviewed Osama Hamdan in Istanbul. You've interviewed Bassem Naim, and like, they're like spokesmen. And if you ask them political questions or say, you know, do you think October 7th was wise, blah, 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 they're going to give you spin like any spokesman. But if you ask them for details about the negotiations, they pretty much have to tell the truth. And they've been telling the truth over and over, unlike the Israelis. So I think it's a credible report by Jeremy Scahill at Dropsite, and the Western media is not really giving them a voice. And and what they show time and time again is that they accept a U.S. proposal, then the Israelis reject the proposal, and then someone like Steve Witkoff will come back and say Hamas is making unacceptable demands, and he will completely renege on the proposal he put forward in order to accommodate Israeli demands. And yeah, there were some kind of war of words or tension between Trump and the Israelis when Trump went to Riyadh and all the Gulf states. He bypassed Israel. Pete Hegseth actually canceled a trip to Israel. We don't know why. Netanyahu was angry and the Israelis were angry that Trump accepted a ceasefire with Ansar Allah in Yemen, called them brave, but did not demand that they stop launching missiles toward Israel. But ultimately, like, the trip to the Gulf amounted to nothing but kind of transactional payoffs to Trump, bribery in broad daylight, but there was no real geopolitical agenda that we could deduce from that trip that drew any daylight between Trump and Israel.
Exactly. So, yeah. And this comes after Israel did sabotage the first round of direct U.S.-Hamas talks back in March, when Adam Bowler, who was Trump's hostage envoy, he had direct talks with Hamas officials, and that's when he, notably came out on CNN and said that the U.S. is not an agent of Israel, and we can make our own decisions. And he even said the Hamas guys were nice guys, and he liked talking to them. And they, Adam Bowler talked about, their discussions were not just about freeing Eitan Alexander, but also a long-term truce. And he said we have a real possibility of having a long-term ceasefire for over many years. And that's when he got pulled from the scene because Israel complained, and Israel, put out some strategically timed leaks to undermine Adam Bowler. But these talks again, so what freed Eitan Alexander was a more recent round of talks, which was successful. But it strikes me as if the U.S. and Israel had some sort of understanding that basically whatever the U.S. would agree to, they wouldn't follow through on, because they didn't, and the genocide continues.
So it was like a gentleman's agreement that should have been put in writing that the U.S. would force Israel to end the siege of Gaza, allow humanitarian aid in, and enact a fairly long temporary ceasefire that was going to lead to a permanent ceasefire. And yeah, Witkoff totally reneged. And one of the pieces of evidence that I would point to is that Witkoff's son, Alex Witkoff, retweeted this tweet by Jason Meister. President Trump and Steve Witkoff saved Eitan Alexander's life. No pallets of cash, no prisoner swaps, and no terrorists released. Every single American, regardless of political affiliation, should be proud of this historic moment. So basically, they didn't give Hamas anything in exchange, and they're bragging about it. And his son is boasting about this through retweet. I mean, the retweet was clearly an endorsement. And that is just horrendous diplomacy that echoed or resonated very negatively in Iran, where I was at the time, speaking to Iranian negotiators. They saw this as evidence of the bad faith of the U.S. and that the U.S. is not trustworthy. And so what did Israel proceed to do after getting Eitan Alexander? Slaughter hundreds and hundreds of civilians. And I mean, we could show you images of charred children, doctor coming to work at the hospital and finding 8 of her 9 children slaughtered. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. Sorry, girl seeking to escape her burning home as her family burns to death and barely escaping, with wounds all over her body. I mean, the unspeakable horrors continue to pour out of Gaza, and it's all thanks to this horrendous U.S. diplomacy, where Steve Witkoff, real estate lawyer, has turned into the latest Jewish American diplomat to serve as Israel's lawyer. And here we are today. And by the way, I mean, what the hell is going on in Edon Alexander's hometown, and what the hell was he doing there in the first place? He wasn't just some hostage. He was a prisoner of war who was an American, Jewish American, who was propagandized by Zionism and decided to fight for a foreign apartheid occupation army. There's not any reason to celebrate this figure. He was enforcing siege and serving basically as a concentration camp guard inside a tank inside Gaza on October 7th. It wasn't like he was just some innocent Jewish victim of anti-Semitism. And this is what was going on in Tenafly, New Jersey upon his release. Look at this. There's like hardly any even American flags there. And like Trumpers, they freak out anytime they see some like Mexicans waving a Mexican flag in areas that used to be Mexico. But then this is like what they celebrate. An entire community that's been propagandized into believing that they deserve a second country on the back of millions of indigenous people.
And again, how did Edon Alexander look compared to all the Palestinian hostages who come out of Israeli torture dungeons? I mean, again, Hamas treats Israeli captives infinitely better than Israel treats. Like, you can't even compare it. I mean, you look at Palestinian prisoners, if they make it out alive, I mean, so many haven't. So many have been murdered, including that prominent doctor a few months ago. But, the Palestinian prisoners who come out of Israeli prisons and dungeons, they're emaciated. They've been tortured. They've been seriously abused. Edon Alexander looked pretty good considering what he's been through.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone is coming out of Gaza with they've lost weight, it's because everybody's lost weight in Gaza. It's because the caloric intake has plummeted across the Gaza Strip, and they're subjected to the same conditions as everyone else, as well as Israeli airstrikes that have killed dozens of captives in Gaza, including Edon Alexander was almost killed on, I believe it was March 15th or April 15th, when Hamas lost contact with the team that was guarding him, and he turned up alive. But there was this sense that Netanyahu wanted him dead, which is why Edon Alexander did not meet with Netanyahu and held a sign just thanking Donald Trump, because the U.S. engaged in direct negotiations with Hamas and had to circumvent Israel because Israel does not want to end this genocide. And with the reneging on the deal to allow humanitarian aid in and a temporary ceasefire after Edon Alexander's release, Israel embarked on an apocalyptic final solution operation in Gaza, and they believe that this will lead to total victory. And what does total victory mean? Total victory means 75% of Gaza will be immediately occupied. This is the Wall Street Journal on Israel's plan for Gaza. Israel aims to control 75% of Gaza in 2 months, military says. And that's part of what the aid distribution plan is about, because they're going to put the aid distribution points mainly in the areas where they want to concentrate the population, keeping them out of central and northern Gaza. They're going to concentrate them all around Rafah. And then from there, they're going to start trying to push them out into Egypt.
Yeah.
Netanyahu even said as much. He's making it seem like, oh, the world and all these acts of God have forced Gaza to be blocked off, but we think that people should be free to leave. They shouldn't be held in prison, because the plan is ethnic cleansing.
Which is how all this began in 1948, with ethnic cleansing, and Israel just trying to finish the job, and in many of the same ways that they did in 1948, with mass terror and taking advantage of the opportunity that they feel they have right now for a final solution. That's why, today, this incident today at the so-called aid distribution center was in the South. And what are they trying to do there? It seems as if, like now in the Western media, it's reported there was chaos and U.S.-Israeli contractors lost control. But it seems like this was deliberate. They want a crisis. They want an excuse to pen people, cage them, and then kick them out. And just to bring this up just so we can recap all the, some of the most important developments. Then a few days ago, it was reported there was another agreement between Hamas and Wickoff, which is the second time in recent memory that this has happened. And immediately, once Israel got word of it, they rejected it, they denounced it, sabotaged it. And once again, as you said earlier, Wickoff came out and said Hamas is making unacceptable demands, which he never ever specifies. He never said what's unacceptable.
We don't know.
So he said this now. This is the second time he's done this. I recall him saying this. I've lost track now when it was, maybe a month ago. That he only says this after Israel objects to a ceasefire framework that he himself brokers. So every single time Israel has objected, Wickoff has fallen in line.
Every single time. Unacceptable. Disappointing and completely unacceptable, according to Wickoff. And it was the proposal was for a 60-day ceasefire with the release of 5 live hostages on the first day and another 5 living hostages on its last day, and it would have increased humanitarian aid to Gaza, forced the withdrawal of Israeli troops to the lines they were in last March, and will have forced Israel to negotiate and not unilaterally resume the war. So those are the points that Israel objected to, obviously, because look at their conduct today. And Wickoff just said, okay, well, and it's not just Wickoff, it's Miriam Adelson, it's the entire network, the preponderance of Zionist power on the Trump administration that is brought to bear in order to compel total unanimity between Trump and Israel on every negotiating point, which is why the slaughter continues. And we just have no idea when it's going to end. The Europeans obviously sense that the U.S. can't be taken seriously to end this war. And, even Germany, one of the biggest sponsors of the Gaza Holocaust, the second largest sponsor of the Gaza Holocaust next to the U.S., is speaking up for the first time. Here's Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
The Israeli
army is now doing in the Gaza Strip. Has increasingly been the case in recent days, can no longer be justified as a fight against Hamas terrorism. And, he was met with Israeli Holocaust guilt, of course. But this is really like the Europeans seeking to assert some sort of leverage, because Trump has just shown that he will do nothing to twist Israel's arm, even after Trump himself acknowledged there's nothing strategically for Israel to gain at this point.
So what finally broke the dam for Germany? It's that Israel imposed the starvation siege and openly bragged about it. And I guess for some allies, that was just a bridge too far. It's okay to commit mass murder for a year and a half against a defenseless death camp, but like imposing a more than 80-day starvation siege and openly bragging about it and just mocking everyone who's objecting to it. I guess finally that's what did it. That's what compelled Germany and Canada and the UK and France to speak out.
Yeah, they spoke up. What have they done? Germany has actual leverage. It supplies Israel with 48% of its weapons, and it's not suspending any arms. The UK has issued some sort of individual sanctions on fanatical settlers,
which is such a convenient foil. You pretend as if the problem is some random extremists in the West Bank, not the people in charge of the government across the political spectrum. So the settlers actually serve that purpose. And also they said they're going to suspend talks on a new trade deal with Israel, Yeah, okay. While still, as Matt Kennard, a British journalist, pointed out tirelessly, still supplying intelligence to Israel to carry out mass murder and weaponry.
Yeah. So it is lip service, too little, too late. Slaughter continues. And Donald Trump continues to pay lip service. I mean, he said that, he wants to wrap up the war. But I saw Alex Jones today, one of Trump's, the biggest pro-Trump propagandists in the media, claiming that Trump is surrounded by figures who won't let him enact his real agenda. And not relating to Israel-Palestine, but it's kind of like, maybe that's the case. So Trump didn't defeat the deep state. He's doing this. He's pretty much like playing the role that Biden played, a doddering old man who's lost control of any agenda and is, being puppeteered by figures who have their own ulterior, militaristic, globalist agenda.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of Trump fans have been saying this from the start that he's being subverted by his own team and okay, well, at a certain point, maybe it's time to think that this is Trump's agenda, and he doesn't really have all the things he talks about. Stopping endless wars, America first. I mean, it's great marketing, and he has a big following and a big supportive fan base because of it. But what does he actually do toward that goal? Nothing. And if it's not obvious by now, I mean, maybe it will be by the end of his first term. Or his second term. Second term, exactly.
It's like it often feels like the third coming of Bush's second term.
Yeah.
Or the third coming of Biden's first term felt like the second coming of Bush's second term.
100%.
No, sorry, Bush's first term was actually worse than the second term, but you know what I'm saying. The neocons, there's just this neocon osmosis.
But today, we need to ask another question. The fact that this is not the first genocide that Zionism has inflicted on the Palestinians, and the fact that we commemorated the Nakba anniversary twice during this genocide, compels us to ask, what evidence is more needed for everyone to realize the nature of Israel and the nature of Zionism? These revisionists are pretending that there is something new in Smotrich's recent statement, that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir were not members of the Security Cabinet, which is constitutionally responsible for the war policy since October, and that Netanyahu's political survival depended on them, did not depend on them on October 2023 as much as now. They are pretending that the problem is reducible to Netanyahu when we have seen an endless supply of genocidal statements and public letters by senior commanders of the army. But Israel's genocidal intent and genocidal conduct were clear from the start to all those who have been willing and able to see the facts and to listen to what Israeli politicians and soldiers have repeatedly said. It was clear from the intensity and speed of the aerial bombardment. Within less than a week of the start of its attack on Gaza in October, Israel had dropped on the small and densely populated strip more explosive than the US dropped on Afghanistan in a year. Within 3 weeks after the start of the attack, Israel dropped on the equivalent of 2 nuclear bombs. It was also clear from the casualties figures, including the proportion of women and children killed and the rate of killing. By mid-2024, the number of those killed in Gaza already exceeded the number of the Rohingya killed in Myanmar, and it exceeded the monthly mortality rate that we witnessed in Bosnia in the early 1990s. It was clear also from the comprehensive scope of the destruction that includes non-military targets and makes the Gaza Strip uninhabitable because it deprives the population from objects that are indispensable for their survival as a group.
So my own solution to this is you give Palestinian rights, you establish a state of Palestine, you stop the Israeli slaughter of Palestinians, you stop the Israeli apartheid state. Israel is dead set against that. The entire Israeli political governance now is dead set against that. Hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers in the West Bank are dead set against that. Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Gallant, Netanyahu are dead set against that. So my view is it has nothing to do with what Israel wants. It has to do with enforcement of international law. So I want to see this imposed, not because Israel agrees to it, but because it is imposed. And there is one country that stands in the way of imposing this, not Iran, not the Saudis, not Egypt, not Russia, not China, not any country in the European Union, one country and one country alone. And that is because of the United States of America. And Israel lobby, that's what stops the solution that could bring peace.
So you have the Germans, they were Nazis who killed Jews, so now they help the Jewish Nazis kill Arabs. They're also helping the Ukrainian Nazis kill the Russians who killed the original German Nazis. So explaining war and genocide to the Germans is like a who's on first sketch with no jokes. That's basically what it is. But they finally figured out after 80 years. Yes. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton here with Kurt Metzger while Jimmy is on the road. Well, here's something. The Germans finally got genocide right, it seems. It took them about, 80 some odd years, but they seem to have finally gotten it right. It's a complicated project for them. Germany threatened steps against Israel as tone shifts over Gaza. So you have the Germans, they were Nazis who killed Jews, so now they help the Jewish Nazis kill Arabs. They're also helping the Ukrainian Nazis kill the Russians who killed the original German Nazis. So explaining war and genocide to the Germans is like a who's on first sketch with no jokes. That's basically what it is. But they finally figured out after 80 years. Yes. So congratulations to them.
They haven't given up on Ukraine yet, though. I never thought that they would give up on Israel before Ukraine. That threw me for a loop a little bit.
That is true. So they have not they're not all the way there yet, but this is a pretty big step here, I would say. Germany threatened steps against Israel as tone shifts over Gaza. Germany's foreign minister threatened unspecified measures against Israel on Tuesday and said Berlin would not export weapons used to break humanitarian law, as he and Chancellor Friedrich Merz delivered their most severe rebuke yet over Gaza. Germany, along with the United States, had long remained in support of Israel's conduct since the October 7th, 2023 attacks by Hamas, even as Israel became increasingly isolated internationally. Its about turn comes as the European Union is reviewing its Israel policy, and Britain, France, and Canada also threatened concrete actions over Gaza. Speaking to broadcaster WDR, Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul warned Germany's historic support for Israel must not be instrumentalized, as massive airstrikes and shortages of food and medicines had made the situation in Gaza, quote, unbearable. Earlier, Merz criticized airstrikes on Gaza as no longer justified by the need to fight Hamas and no longer comprehensible in comments at a press conference in Finland. So here are a couple of these sound bites.
Die israelische Armee jetzt im Gazastreifen macht. Ich verstehe offen gestanden nicht mehr mit welchem Ziel.
I no longer understand, frankly, what its objective is.
Die Zivilbevölkerung
to cause such suffering to the civilian population,
wie das in den letzten Tagen
as has increasingly been the case in recent days,
lässt sich
can
nicht
no longer
mehr
be
mit einem
justified
Kampf
as a
gegen den
fight against
Terrorismus der
Hamas
Hamas
terrorism.
begründen.
You don't know, you can't put together what the goal is there?
Yeah, no, it's so maddening. It's so maddening. It really is. Here's the second piece of this.
Überschritten werden,
When lines are crossed where international humanitarian law is now really being violated, then Germany, the German chancellor, must also say something about it. We Germans known for being sticklers about international humanitarian law. It's not like it was written because of us.
Not like they're rounding people up currently for tweets and bragging about it on 60 Minutes in a way like you'd think they were Russia.
Oh, yeah. No, it's extraordinary. We have some of that in this piece, actually. While not a complete rupture, the shift in tone is significant in a country whose leadership follows a policy of special responsibility for Israel, known as the Staatsräson, due to the legacy of the Nazi Holocaust. Whenever I got in trouble at daycare, I would always just scream, Staatsräson!
Statsreisen,
Statsreisen, and she would leave me alone because I was Jewish, so I would invoke the Statsreisen, whatever. Whenever I had to go to the bathroom and they wouldn't let me, I would say Statsreisen, and they'd say, "Okay, go ahead, you're good. I'm sorry, I apologize." See, nowadays I can't
Prussian word, ain't it?
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, so this was before, so Germany has a new chancellor now, but Friedrich Merz, but of course, just after October 7th, Olaf Scholz was the German chancellor. So here he is, November 14th, 2023, refuting allegations that Israel's committing war crimes in Gaza as absurd. So this kind of gives you how far the Germans have come in these 19 months.
Eine Demokratie, auch das muss sehr klar gesagt werden und auch darüber gibt es keinen Zweifel, das werden wir auch in jedem Gespräch und bei jeder Gelegenheit
We will emphasize in every conversation and at every opportunity that this is our view. Israel is a country that is committed to human rights and international law and acts accordingly. And that is why the accusations being made against Israel are absurd. And there can be no doubt about this.
None.
Well, now they're having some doubts finally. This is the same Germany where scenes like this are routine. So yes, what you see there in that screen is a child. Yes, a child, a little boy, carrying a Palestinian flag. Watch how the German police react to him.
Okay.
Really atoning for their Nazi past. Running down a child in the street, waving a flag.
More adults with those flags.
Really living down their reputation there. The same Germany where police intimidated organizers into switching venues in an effort to shut down entirely, which thankfully they were unsuccessful at in this instance. A speaking event with the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, Francesca Albanese. They were organizing a pro-Palestine event in Germany, and it almost got canceled. It had to move to a different venue because the government threatened the first venue. And the second of those trips, the second of those events, was successfully canceled. Germany's second talk by top UN official canceled. A major Berlin university canceled a public lecture by Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, following pressure from the Berlin mayor. Many academics are outraged. Of course, this is the same Germany where now anti-Semites cannot be granted German citizenship under new law that's dated October 25th, 2023.
Why did
Germany... Sorry, go ahead.
Didn't they do mass immigration for many years of people that you could say have enough of a grudge against Israel to be considered by their government anti-Semitic?
That is true. They did let quite a few anti-Semites in. That is a good point. I never thought of it that way, but yes, they did. When you frame it that way, yeah, I guess you have a point.
Was mass Syrian? Remember all the Syrians that got displaced?
Oh yeah, well, Angela Merkel, she was like she and a few others, but really she, more than any other German leader, was like the poster child for the liberal immigration policy. Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't think that Israel might come up when they do that.
That's true. You know, they should have thought about that. I'm surprised they didn't think about that.
Well,
I guess that's an example where it kind of slipped through. But November of last year, Germany passes controversial anti-Semitism resolution. The German lower house of parliament has passed a highly controversial resolution to combat anti-Semitism, despite opposition from legal experts, civil society groups, and prominent Jewish intellectuals. First proposed in the wake of Hamas's terror attacks on October 7th, and in response to the subsequent rise in incidents reported as anti-Semitic in Germany, the controversy over the resolution largely has centered on the intent to make public grants for culture and science projects dependent on adherence to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which explicitly prohibits criticizing the state of Israel and conflates criticism of Zionism with anti-Semitism. So yes, it
starts out normal.
Yeah,
I read it. It starts out like, okay, well, I'll see. Like, oh, if you say Zionism isn't Judaism, you make a separation that is anti-Semitic.
Well, the thing that's so strange about that is that part of the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, whatever the hell it is, part of their list of items that are considered anti-Semitic is holding Jews responsible for the actions of the state of Israel, which is so weird because that contradicts all the other things, because every other item is basically saying to criticize Israel is to criticize Jews.
Right.
So to criticize Israel is to criticize Jews, then aren't you saying Jews and Israel are linked inextricably?
Well,
Therefore, would it not stand to reason that Jews are responsible for the conduct of Israel? Because you're saying you can't criticize one without the other. So it doesn't even make sense on its own terms. But I suppose it doesn't have to. So for a somber take on this, let's go to Rabbi Shmuley. Shut the hell up in Germany. Never dare lecture Jews about genocide, you scoundrel.
And buy my daughter's dildo.
My daughter's dildo, 20% off now through Purim. Yes.
They're kosher because we put them in jars.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So this just goes to show you, like, if you're, Russell said this on our show the other day. If you're gonna, like, tepidly criticize Israel, you may as well go all the way, because these people do not tolerate any dissent. We just showed you police chasing down a child, a young boy, for carrying a Palestinian flag. We just showed you laws passed in Germany since October 7th, over the past 19 months. And they already had some of the strictest anti-Semitism laws on the books of any European country. But you go as far as to say, okay, enough is enough. With withholding aid for 11 months straight, that's over the line. We can't stand by this anymore. And this is the reaction you get. So you may as well just go all out, because they won't take 99%. You have to give them 100% or nothing. The minute you stray at all, you get this kind of treatment from
Kamala Harris got it. The Democrats got it, didn't they? Trump is like, I'm going to build a casino in Gaza. And you have to go that way or you're out.
Exactly. So I think the fact that Germany is talking like this is an indication that the tide has turned. The fact that Piers Morgan recently, came out and essentially bent the knee on the question of genocide. The fact that Bono spoke out, right? I mean, none of these people will do anything. Yeah, even Bono.
Is Springsteen next?
Yeah, we'll see if Springsteen is next somehow. Yeah. I don't know if Springsteen is next, although he's Steen, so he may be next. If he were Stein, I would probably bet against that. But no, he might be next. Maybe he'll be next.
is a major, like how when I knew Me Too is over, not when it should have been, when Biden, they didn't go after Biden, which
right, for Tara Reid, yeah.
Yeah, literally grabbing her by the you-know-what. He actually did that, but whatever. It didn't end until Amber Heard. That's when it ended, because that's when the people that don't follow politics but do follow Pirates of the Caribbean, when they saw it was on. So Piers Morgan is a major indicator. For that rat to jump ship, your ship is really leaking, because that guy would have not, he was enjoying his position on it.
Exactly. And that's why, because whenever you cover stuff like this, you always get a lot of feedback from people who are saying, they're phonies, they're fake, you shouldn't take them seriously. And I say, yes, you're right. It's not about them. They are a barometer. They are a measurement of where the society is. Bono will not stray too far from the mainstream. So if Bono is anti-Israel or criticizing the Israeli government, he didn't go as far as to criticize the state or the ethos of the project. But the fact that he is, criticizing the war and basically, calling for an end to the war, that is an indication that is now the mainstream sentiment. So it's valuable in that. And I think this German about face is indication of that as well.
Yeah, well, dude, first of all, for 20 years, I didn't know anything about it. I remember this blockade of Gaza and I thought that sounds kind of harsh, and I didn't think about it.
Right.
So I didn't pay attention at this whole time, and I thought the situation was very complicated. And also not worth it for me to get into on a career level. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm in entertainment. How would that help me? And Jimmy, and when Pasta was here, back when it...
Oh, yeah, that Norm interview, yeah.
And they were throwing out words like genocide and stuff that I am not comfortable calling it at all. But guess what? Them Nuremberg laws, the laws after Nuremberg say it is, not me.
Right.
The fact that I know how bad it is means Israel screwed up. Because I'm naturally prejudiced against Muslims, because I'm a good person, obviously. I would never listen to an Arab. Jews told me. So I can't stress that enough. Like, if I ever talk to Jordan Peterson, whoever, here's where I'm coming from. I didn't want to know the truth, but now I had to know it because they screwed up that bad.
Jordan Peterson would be so proud of how clean your apartment is.
I really would
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big, beautiful, terrific apartment.
You grew up and made your bed. Yeah. The couch looks terrific. I can tell you're a real man now. You're on your way.
All right, be honest. Have you noticed yourself moving slower, avoiding stairs, feeling stiff in the morning? If you know what I mean. If so, pay attention. The truth is, mobility doesn't just vanish overnight. It's slow decline. It's a slow decline. And before you know it, you're the guy making weird noises every time you get off the couch. But by the time you pay those grunts enough attention, it can feel too late. But it doesn't have to be. That's where Juvent comes in. This isn't some gimmick or magic pill. It's a clinically proven device that uses safe, low-impact micro vibrations to strengthen your bones, improve your circulation, and keep your joints working the way they're supposed to. Notice I said micro vibrations. This isn't like those other shake plates on the market, which, by the way, can be extremely dangerous. I stand by my Juvent, and I stand on my Juvent for at least 20 minutes a day. I use it. I was using it before they were an advertiser on the show. It was recommended to me by Pierre Corey because it creates stem cells. It helps your joints, your bones. You know, I have a bone problem, and it's made a noticeable difference in how I feel. It's like giving your body a tune-up before it completely breaks down. Athletes, doctors, even NASA use this thing, and it's good enough. It's good enough for astronauts. It's good enough for me, especially lady astronauts. With a 10-year limited warranty, financing options, and the ability to use FSA funds, it's never been easier. So don't wait until your knees sound like a bowl of Rice Krispies. Get a Juvent today. Go to juvent.com/Dore and start moving like you're supposed to. That's JUVENT.com/DORE. Use the code DORE for $300 off at checkout. Your joints will thank you. Trust me. Come see us live in Los Angeles, Buffalo, Toledo, Montreal, Ottawa, Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Let's begin with the Palestinian resistance and the recent operation that they carried out in an area called Beit Lahia. Beit Lahia, again, very important to note here, on the borders with Israel in the northern part of Gaza. A couple of hundreds of meters from the siege, from the borders with Israel. The Palestinian resistance is operating in that location, and it's not stopping. And they targeted a Merkava tank, and they had an ambush in a house. They detonated a building, took down a building that had many IDF terrorists inside of it. This new operation comes a couple of weeks after the Palestinian resistance had similar operations in the southern part of Rafah, and in the two cases we're talking about the armed wing of Hamas, the Azz-Din al-Qassam brigades. That's apart from the activities of the other resistance movements, by the way. Let's have a look at the video and then we'll go through all of the details as well. So this is a tank here, as you can see, a Merkava tank, and one of the Israeli terrorists here standing, looking for children to murder or women to snipe. All of a sudden, doesn't know where it's coming. All of a sudden he's hit out of nowhere, and the Merkava tank goes up in flames. Merkava tanks, they can have approximately 4, 5 to 6 people. Each Merkava tank costs about 5 to 6 million US dollars. Add to that a substantial amount of diapers, just because of how much these people shit themselves. They're so scared in the Merkava tanks. All of that adds up. The Palestinian resistance took down 1,200 vehicles belonging and machinery belonging to the Israeli terror forces, and now they're taking down this Merkava tank in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Talk about Gideon's chariots or Netanyahu's wheelchair and these garbage things that they call their genocidal operations when they target children. Targeting children, starving them to death. You've seen the scenes of the people going through cages and storming these places to get a box of food. That's what they're targeting. And the Palestinian resistance is concentrating on the actual fighting. Now, this came alongside another operation, which was an ambush in this building over here, in Beit Lahia too. Beit Lahia, North Gaza, close to the Israeli borders again. Israel was supposed to be done with that. I mean, over a year ago, in the beginning of the war, Israel destroyed these parts in November 2023. And they previously stated that they killed some of the Palestinian resistance leaders in those areas, only for everyone to find out that they're still alive after the ceasefire happened. They were roaming around freely, talking to people and catching up with them. And they're talking about, we're almost done with Hamas, and they're almost going to eliminate Hamas and what have you. None of that is happening. That came alongside other operations coming from the Palestinian resistance in other parts of Gaza too. There were other attacks by the Palestinian resistance in the eastern part of Khan Yunis, and in that case, the Palestinian resistance targeted a troop carrier. Troop carriers that belong to Israel can hold up to 17 terrorists inside them. They targeted that, and they also targeted a Merkava. Again, Khan Yunis, an area that Israel said it expelled all of the population from, almost. But then again, the reports that are coming from Israel, we need to take them with a pinch of salt, or a bowl or two. But the Palestinian resistance is active everywhere from the south to the north, with this new campaign called David Stones against the genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, this leads us to the talks. So this resistance is happening in Gaza. What's going on with all of the talk about the ceasefire? Are we seeing a show? Is the American and Israeli side just having a show, a theater? Are there real differences in opinion? Is there something substantial? Well, there are interesting things that have happened in the past couple of days. Firstly, we've seen a pattern of deterioration between the Trump administration and Benjamin Netanyahu, undeniably. Listen, we're still not talking about anything strategic. This is for people to understand that we're talking about tactical changes of view. We're still not talking about anything to do with the strategic relationships between Israel and the United States. And even with all of this talk coming from European countries against Israel, that hasn't affected the strategic relationship yet between them and the State of Israel. However, tactically, from a viewpoint, a position of views, a position of preferences, interests, there are undeniable differences. And these differences are being spoken about in political circles, in military circles in Israel, in public circles too. Some people, the opposition leaders, saying that we lost the American umbrella now. Might be far-fetched, but they're saying that in Israel. Trump didn't visit. J.D. Vance canceled his visit. The Secretary of State canceled his visit too when Trump came to the area, and they still haven't recovered. They still haven't fixed these problems. Now the most recent report is coming about this conversation that happened between Netanyahu and Trump. Heated spat over Iran nuclear talks, the report said. Netanyahu and Trump are in disagreement over how to deal with Iran's nuclear program, which has been a cause of tensions between the United States and Israel. The report said that they engaged in a heated phone conversation last week about Iran's nuclear program and the negotiations between Washington and Tehran to reach a deal. And then they spoke about the situation in Gaza. Trump told Netanyahu that he wanted a diplomatic solution for the Iranians, believing in the ability to reach a deal. He didn't want Benjamin Netanyahu to make something that was risky, dangerous, or irresponsible, especially with the reports coming from the United States that Israel is preparing an attack against Iran. Basically, Donald Trump, in essence, is telling Benjamin Netanyahu, tone it down, we don't want problems now because I'm about to reach a deal with Iran, or there's a very high likelihood of me reaching a deal with Iran. Now, Heated conversation. There were other reports about heated conversations previously. In the meantime, there are senior figures from Israel based in the United States who went to the United States, Ron Dermer and the head of the Mossad. Both of them going to the United States, not trying to reach a deal, but according to confirmations from Israel, from Israeli reports too, they are going to the United States to try and thwart the nuclear agreement between the United States and Iran. That's according to Ben Caspit in Ma'ariv, according to a fairly stubborn sources, and is a very well-known reporter and writer, columnist in Israel. The purpose of the Mossad head Barna and Dermer's trip to Washington is a last-ditch attempt to block a dramatic announcement of an interim agreement between Iran and the United States on the nuclear issue. This could be very substantiated. Why? Because Ron Dermer is the poodle of Benjamin Netanyahu, and the head of the Mossad has proven himself to be a very obedient servant for Benjamin Netanyahu too, despite the fact that there were reports that they were in disagreement in the beginning of the war, and the head of the Mossad wanted to actually end the war alongside the leading figures in the cabinet at the time, and Ren Bar, the head of the Shin Bet, and other senior figures in the Israeli military intelligence directorate. But now he's clearly shifting a position, and the purpose of Netanyahu sending him and Ron Dermer to the United States is to show his poodle, Ron Dermer, who is a yes man for Benjamin Netanyahu, does as he's told, with the head of the Mossad adding the weight of the Israeli Mossad, so that the head of the Mossad can tell the American administration, look, we have substantial information that these people are not going to actually stop enriching uranium, for example. They actually stated at any point that they're going to try and stop enriching uranium. Iran denied that outright, that they're going to stop anything. They said we will continue enriching uranium. There is no negotiation about us enriching uranium. This is not on the table. The only thing we're ready to talk about in the talks between them and the United States administration is how much, and the fact that we're not going to go to have nuclear weapons. That was the deal. And it isn't just, of course, the reports coming from Israel. The New York Times as well was quoted saying that the United States is actually indeed worried about a possible attack coming from Israel against Iran, something that could hinder the prospect of talks between the United States administration and the Iranian side too. And that's why Donald Trump had this conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the man who always led this hawkish lobby and influenced them, the United States, to go for wars for the sake of Israel and take down any government that he deems as a potential threat to the state of Israel, whether it's Iraq or other countries in the region too. But clearly, Trump, he made a statement the other day during which he stated that we're not going to be imposing democracy at the point of a gun. In effect, that the United States isn't willing to play this police role globally. He has made previous criticism previously. Yes, contradicts his statements too, absolutely. But it doesn't look like the United States is taking any concrete action to go and follow the ambitions of Benjamin Netanyahu and the plans to go and attack Iran. Why? But because he also sacked Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz was a very close figure to Benjamin Netanyahu. He recently also sacked two people from the U.S. National Security Council who were recruited and appointed by Mike Waltz. Again, another signal that he is shifting away from these people who seek wars, who seek problems, who seek more destruction and genocide. And he's clearly not interested in that at the moment. He wants to reach a deal. The deal isn't guaranteed. Of course, there are problems. There are things to talk about, but he doesn't want Benjamin Netanyahu going and carrying out an attack against Iran. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is not toning it down. Why? Because the United States left the Red Sea. The United States participated and established the Genocide Coalition in support of a genocidal entity. They led it eventually only with the United Kingdom, by the way, in the Red Sea. Ansarullah in Yemen managed to split the United States from Israel in the Red Sea. That's a massive accomplishment from Yemen. Now, Israel is stepping up and carrying out more attacks against Yemen, against the airport, against the Hodeidah port, against other locations in Yemen too. But Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the fact that the attacks that are being carried out against Israel now, outside of the Gaza Strip, are primarily coming in or only coming from Yemen, no other front is open at the moment, he is not saying that Yemen is the side that is responsible for these attacks, and he is still blaming Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying Yemen is just a symptom, Iran is the cause behind all of this. As we can see in this report here, the Houthis are just a symptom, Iran is responsible. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the attack in Yemen, issued a statement in parallel with the hearing of his trial. The Air Force attacked again in the airport of Sana'a, which is controlled by the Houthi in Yemen. We act according to simple principle. Whoever harms us, we will harm him. Whoever does not understand this by force, they will understand by even greater force. But as I have said more than once, the Houthis are only a symptom. The main force behind them is Iran, and is responsible for the aggression emanating from Yemen. That means Benjamin Netanyahu is not toning it down, and he is clearly signaling that he might do something against Iran. Now, of course, how effective, that's a separate story. Israel failed miserably in its 2 attacks against Iran. The one that took place in October was thwarted, and Iran successfully took it down. Israel didn't even dare to go next to the Iranian airspace. They weren't even over the Gulf. They were only in the Iraqi airspace that the United States forces use, and they carried out attacks against Iran from there, only for the Iranian Air Force air defense systems to take all of the Israeli terrorist regime's missiles very, very effectively by their own air defense systems, and with air defense systems that they might have from other countries too. Now, moving on to Yemen, Israel and Yemen, tensions have been rising between the two. Yemen, Ansarullah, they have been the only front that was open for the entirety of this genocide. They participated very shortly after October the 7th, and they declared that they will be attacking Israel and Israeli interests in the Red Sea. They constantly expanded their reach up until they said, and they constantly repeat this, Israel stops the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip and lifts the siege of the people in Gaza. That did not happen, and Ansarullah in Yemen, they constantly attacked Israel even when they were very close to reach a negotiation deal. Previously, before the recent ceasefire took effect, the Ansarullah movement in Yemen, they were attacking Israel one day before the ceasefire took effect, because they said this is in support for the Palestinian negotiator, and we will be monitoring the implementation of the ceasefire, and if there are any breaches, we will attack Israel again. Now, Israel is carrying out more attacks against Ansarullah in Yemen, and they are now saying, well, confirming as well in Yemen, they targeted the last plane that they had in Yemen that was being used by Ansarullah. Now, Ansarullah, of course, they had a couple of clarifications, and they made several statements to clarify the position. They said that we still receive planes. Anything that was damaged will be repaired, and we will continue the attacks against Israel. As a matter of fact, one of their senior figures, Muhammad al-Bukhaiti, he had an interview with Al Arabi Network, and in which he said a couple of things. Why? Because the Israeli defense minister, genocide minister, Israel Katz, he said that they destroyed the last plane. And al-Bukhaiti said to that, responded by saying, we will destroy the last occupation. So they're saying they destroyed the last plane of Yemen. We say we will destroy the last occupation on earth, which is the state of Israel. A plane is nothing, according to him. We're running away from the torture of God. If we don't fight, we will be tortured by God. These people are faithful people and fight based on principle. The Gazans, we tell you, we won't leave you and we will sacrifice everything for you. He said, the things that were hit, they will be replaced. We have been through this for 10 years in our war with Saudi Arabia. The airport was closed for 7 years previously. The airport can still be used and any damage will be repaired. And we will accept parts, if we accept flights from other parts too. Unfortunately, we're not getting any support from other Arab states. As a matter of fact, they participate in these crimes led by the United States. Plus, the airport links are through Jordan and Egypt. It's impossible to transfer any weapons anyway, as these airports are for civilian purposes only, and they travel through countries that have ties both with the United States and Israel. And it's impossible to carry out any weapons on them or anything of the sort. Again, that's a clarification, and that's debunking all of the myth that's being pushed or was pushed previously by the United States and is still being pushed by Israel, that the Sana'a airport is a hub of transporting weapons and what have you, because all of the flights go through Egypt and Jordan. Egypt and Jordan, both of them have ties with the United States and with Israel too. And he finished it by saying there is a misunderstanding amongst some in the Arab world that we should not resist until we have similar power to our enemies. And to that he answered, we rely on God, and God's power is above the power of America. The Yemenis, these people are people of total absolute faith. Their dialogue, the way they talk, is not like anyone else. You know, people will tell you, oh yeah, we're not capable, and no financial interests that come and they'll do this. Yemen will tell you, no, we're afraid of our creator if we don't attack, and from the hereafter. Whereas the other calculations are not really the same. The other countries, other Arab countries, they're calculating it based on, well, are we capable? Are we not capable? Can we do it now? Can we do it tomorrow? We're not really in a position, and we're weak, and the United States will destroy us, and. The list goes on. Now, clearly, Ansarullah, they said they will also escalate too. Said they attacked the airport. We'll continue attacking the airport, shut down and destroy them as well, according to Al-Bukhiti. And they have been clearly implementing that. Time after time, they only escalate. Now, in Israel, they are saying now outright that this has been a defeat. This was a defeat. And the situation, it can no longer be whitewashed. And that's another article that the same person that I quoted previously, name is Ben Caspit, had in this article here. While the residents in the settlement were still hiding in the military barracks, Netanyahu was already plotting the plan for the next day. In his case, the plan was survival and keeping himself in the chair, saying that 600 days we are unable to defeat Hamas. 600 days have passed and Benjamin Netanyahu isn't reaching a deal. The priority is to get a deal, even if we don't completely eliminate Hamas, the wishful thinking, of course. But more and more criticism is coming against Benjamin Netanyahu amongst the Israeli media circles, Israeli mainstream media. People are all of a sudden in Israeli mainstream media, by the way, for those of you who don't follow Israeli mainstream media, all of a sudden the suffering of the Gazan population is being made public. Previously we used to see only the rubble and the after effects, right? Total destruction. But now they're actually showing some images about the suffering of the people, about the hunger, about the things that the people suffer from day after day. Now that could be a way in which the Israeli media is applying pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu's government, because like Ben Caspit in his report said, in his article said, this is the worst defeat in Israeli history. This is the worst defeat in our history. We haven't been through anything like that. Previously, we took down 6 Arab armies in 6 days, and now we are unable to take Hamas in Gaza or the Palestinian resistance in Gaza after 600 days. We failed miserably. This is a huge defeat. So this could be an attempt to apply more pressure on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach a deal. Now, talking about the deal. there were several reports that Hamas accepted a new proposal that Steve Witkoff brought to light. This deal was supposed to be a deal that Israel saw. It's not the same deal that they spoke about a few days back. However, we're clearly talking about something new, something we haven't seen before. So there were a couple of reports. This was one of them here. Behind Witkoff's statement on a new document for a deal and Smotrich's warning, I will not allow it. And we will get to the fact that Smotrich is saying, I will not allow it, and how that could really mean that there is something actually happening. Otherwise, the finance minister wouldn't really say that and wouldn't be feeling under pressure to say it. Trump's envoy updated on new terms document shortly after Hamas updated on an agreement with him. Sources who spoke with Witkoff were impressed. The US will do anything for a deal. And then the finance minister was quick to warn Netanyahu against a partial deal. Saar sent a counter message, that's the foreign minister, do not give in to political threats. What is known about the outline formulated behind Israel's back? So they're confirming that this was formulated behind Israel's back. That's an Israeli website, it was one of the biggest websites in Israel, confirming that this has been behind Israel's back, dealt between Hamas and the American representatives. So Israel is out of the picture in terms of this new proposal. This proposal has only been done by Steve Witkoff and by the Palestinian resistance delegation. Israel has had nothing to say in this deal, and the Palestinians, they have been talking with the Americans for quite a long time. So what's about this deal? Well, that's where things get a little bit even more trickier. Why? Because not a lot has been published about the deal, but some of the leaks that were out recently spoke about a temporary ceasefire and then a long-term ceasefire, a peaceful solution. Witkoff would be overseeing this agreement. This was a demand coming from the Palestinian resistance. Witkoff will make sure that it is enforced and will make sure that the Israelis continue with the next phase. So we're talking about certain guarantees. And in Israel, they're saying that the United States is using kind of sneaky terms to try and convince Israel to go in. Behind the scenes, according to this report, and behind Israel's back, there is an agreement in principle between Hamas and Steve Witkoff without Israel knowing the details. This is something important. And again, Israel is trying to say that the United States is kind of trying to force Israel to go into this agreement. And according to this report too, sources who have in-depth knowledge are saying that it appears to be that Donald Trump is sick from the Israeli management of the war in Gaza, and he wants to get this over and done with. Donald Trump has had enough of Israel. He's sick of all of this, and he wants to get it over and done with without necessarily telling them anything, but only speaking with the Palestinian resistance through a Palestinian-American mediator, reaching a deal that he won't give Israel the whole details of, and force Israel to go into this deal. Of course, how likely will that be? It would really highly depend on the pressure that is going to be implemented by the United States against Israel. That's a very big thing. Now, another sign that there is something, that there's some pressure, and that Benjamin Netanyahu is considering something, is the fact that the finance minister, Smotrich, said that I will not allow a partial deal. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich referred to the new outline for a new deal initiated by the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, which he said he would deliver soon. He said that we need to continue tightening the noose around Hamas' neck and force it into a deal of complete surrender with all of the hostages at once. He said it would be delusional fully to release pressure now and sign a partial deal that would give it oxygen and a lifeline and allow it to recover. I will not allow such a thing to happen, period. Is that a threat that he would resign? Maybe. However, these people are liars. They're immoral. The only person who resigned previously was Ben Gvir. Smotrich tried to legitimize the first phase of the ceasefire. He might do the same thing again if it suits him, because both him and Ben Gvir know that once they're out of this cursed government, well, the most cursed, because we're talking about an Israeli government here and all of them are cursed, they're not going to come back to power. These people are going to be out because they have been tried and tested and they're losing in the Israeli polls. So if we have an election tomorrow, Smotrich might not pass the threshold to have anyone in the Israeli Knesset, let alone being in the Netanyahu government. And they know this reality, but they try and extract as much as possible from Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, he might go into something because he knows that it's soon going to be inevitable that his government is going to collapse. Because of the Haredi movement, that's it. In his government, he's going to have this new conscription move happening with his government that will start enforcing more things. They previously stated if one of the community gets imprisoned for not attending or not going to the Israeli army, the government will collapse within hours. And then they threatened that they will leave Israel en masse. We're talking about 1.2 million people. So Netanyahu clearly has a plan B already now, more fragile than what he has now. However, he knows that it's about to end. If someone's about to leave the government, if all of the pressure is adding up, he knows very well that he never wanted a government with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and he only went with them because they were the only people who would accept a government with him. This means that he might actually go on an actual deal to try and reach a ceasefire, especially again also because of the continued pressure coming from the United States and the unbelievable heroism of Gaza. Unbelievable. I mean, these people going through all of this and still surviving and sticking to their land and not fleeing, despite reports that there were options for them to leave. All of that is very significant at the end of the day. So, will Benjamin Netanyahu accept this deal? It's not about whether Benjamin Netanyahu accepts this deal or not. It's about how much pressure the United States actually puts on Benjamin Netanyahu, because if Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to reach a deal, he could have reached a deal several months back. As a matter of fact, he could have reached a deal over a year ago because he was guaranteed a safety net from the opposition in Israel. Now, the fact that he might actually lose his coalition, that he might actually collapse, the government might collapse, he's looking at a way where he might have to or be forced to go into a temporary ceasefire. Also added by the pressure of the families of the prisoners of war. They're escalating their tone lately, blaming the government of not only murdering their loved ones in Gaza, but also implementing the Hannibal Directive outright. They're saying all of that. And if such a deal it comes to light, it will be the temporary initial phase that will lead to a final and or a longer temporary ceasefire, permanent ceasefire agreement guaranteed by the United States. Hence why Donald Trump was saying, we want to control Gaza, we want to control Gaza. That might have something to do with it. In the first part of that ceasefire that reports are saying is going to be about 70 days, anywhere between 60 to 90, but lots of reports repeated the number 70. In the first 10 days, 5 Israelis who are alive will be released alongside 5 bodies, and the final day, another 5 will be released alongside 5 bodies, leaving, of course, over half of the total number of those who remain now in Gaza held by the Palestinian resistance. They still will be held by the Palestinian resistance up until the final phase is going to be done. These are the thick lines. The details are, of course, the aid, 1,000 trucks a day, then the talks about the rebuilding, a new administration, technocratic government, a long-standing solution, all of that comes after this initial temporary ceasefire comes in with the US guarantees to force Israel to end the war completely. And again, a lot of it is in the hands of the United States administration. So if the United States administration decides to apply enough pressure to the level where it would force Benjamin Netanyahu and his government to go into a ceasefire, they will.